How to become magnetic and make your man obsessed with you like forever. This is my new series on how to be magnetic. I'm going to be sharing some great tips how to apply different universal laws as well as understand the psychology, because it all comes down to psychology. When you understand human nature, it'll be just so easier to seduce anyone and everyone. When it comes to being magnetic, it all comes down to your energetic boundary. It all comes down to you knowing what your energy is, what your frame is, and what other people's energies are. When you maintain energetic boundary, it just becomes easy not to accept other people's perceptions of you. Imagine if you accept other people's perceptions of you, which may be distorted and not true. But if you don't have this energetic boundary and know yourself to a very high level of degree, then you will start internalizing other people's thoughts and perceptions of you. And imagine if they think of you something bad, and most people are judgmental. So if you accept, internalize their judgments of you, the way you show up in the world will be from that perception, which may not be necessarily benefiting your life. This will lead to you assuming the worst possibility, because it all comes down to our self-image. Our self-image creates our assumptions about reality. So essentially tackling your self-image and the states of consciousness that determine your self-image. Here are the states of consciousness that were introduced by Dr. David Hawkins. I will explain to you how exactly this works in the self-image, self-concept, and how it leads to law of assumption, as well as everyone is you pushed out. So when you are in a particular state of consciousness, your thoughts vibrate at a certain level as well as feeling. This produces a self-image, how you perceive yourself and how you perceive the world. In terms of God, when you're below 200, you assume that God is external. See, assumptions are being formed from levels of consciousness because they create our self-image and how we view the world, meaning attitude. So literally attitude and our self-image, which is determined by the state of consciousness we are in, determines our assumptions about our reality. This leads us to everyone is you pushed out. So what you assume to be true about your reality, which is determined by your self-image and the level of consciousness you're currently in, leads you to projection and experiencing a reflection of your consciousness back to you, which is everyone is you pushed out. So all the assumptions that come from that state of consciousness, right, that you're in, are being reflected back to you by the world and the people around you. So they start pretty much reflecting your own relation to yourself and to the world. Essentially, we are here to tackle the state of consciousness and develop energetic boundaries. What separates us from other people so that we do not blend with other people's energies too much. Notice this pattern in myself. I'm such an empath, and most of you guys are too. And I would just like accept every person's pains and emotional worlds, and it would mess up with my life, really, like in the way I was acting. A lot of stuff wasn't even mine, it was other people. Imagine other people's states of consciousness get internalized by you, and then you start acting them out. And since we know that our actions lead to reactions from the world in certain circumstances and situations happening in our life, your action has intention, right? It has energetic frequency. Then you get the undesirable results because it's not your energy. Energies are mixed up. So in order to be magnetic, in order to make your man obsessed or whoever obsessed with you, with your work, with your talents and skills, if you want your audience to resonate with you, you need to know who you are outside of other people. And you need to be so unapologetic in the way you present yourself. And also like not be afraid to be different, not be afraid of not being understood. That's what makes you so magnetic. People love others who have a nerve to strike different. Audiences and just men in general love women who are unbothered. They love women who have their goals, who have their career, who put themselves first. So realizing that your states of consciousness determine your self-image, then that self-image leads to you assuming certain things about your life, which is then results in everyone is you pushed out. So that's all. That's the entire law of attraction, law of assumption. And all these concepts may be very confusing to us, right? A lot of people, but I just summarized it how it works. Because one concept leads to another and then to another and to another. At the very, very top, we have states of consciousness. So understanding states of consciousness is more important because that will determine your level of awareness and your self-image, which will then make you form assumptions about your reality, good or bad. If your level of consciousness is below 200, then your assumptions are distorted. Realize that. Also study a little bit of Dr. David Hawkins. I do have his book, Power versus Force and Letting Go. So amazing. But in Power versus Force, that's where he introduces the map of consciousness and how each level of consciousness affects our psychology and energy. It's this train effect on us, states of consciousness. If you're above 200, the way you view God is also different. So you view God as something internal, something a part of you. But when you're below 200, you view God as being external force over which you don't have any power or control. And also the view of God is like hostile. I want you to understand yourself to such a degree and like have an ability to identify your states of consciousness throughout the day based on your thinking and assumptions that you're making in your life. So this is going to like honestly help you so much more than anything else. And this is exactly what I'm teaching. I'm teaching you how to use states of consciousness, how understand what states of consciousness form negative assumptions in your reality and why you're dealing with your circumstance. What brought you to these circumstances and how to overcome them pretty much. In order to overcome our circumstances, we need to look at the state of consciousness that created those assumptions, for which everyone is you pushed out, show us evidence of, because the world reflected it back to you. So when the world reflects things back to you, you need to identify what exactly created it, meaning states of consciousness. The more you do this, the more you'll get in a habit of changing your states of consciousness throughout the day. You'll literally transform yourself throughout the day. Surprise other people. Don't be the same. Don't be predictable. Because when you're predictable, they know how you're going to move. They know what you're going to say, your tendencies. Have a nerve to be different. Have a nerve to, not go with a program. Agree to something yesterday that was a benefit to them and not yourself. But then the next day you feel like, oh, I don't want to do it. Oh, it doesn't really meet my needs. It doesn't really, benefit my life. But because of a people-pleasing mentality, you may not be able to say no and to opt out, right? But I'm telling you to actually opt out. Even if you agreed to something yesterday because of your people-pleasing mentality, the next day, if it doesn't sit right with you, say no, regardless of what they think. This is how you build your unshakable confidence, for which people will have so much respect for you. They may not like it initially, but trust me, this teaches them something about you. That you're not a follower, that you're a leader, and that you cannot be boxed in just easily because of other people's perception. Guess what happens? They start meeting you halfway. They start actually being what you want them to be. My dad would tell me this saying in Russian. If a mountain doesn't go to Magomed, eventually Magomed will make a move towards a mountain, right? Are you a Magomed or are you a mountain? Can you be mountain and not move from your stance until your stance is being reciprocated? If that makes sense. Hope this helped. Follow for more.